And this is a video that we have a lot of... We're not back?
No.
Guess it's back. Back again. Okay, this is a video...
No. Who are you?
They know who I am.
You didn't even say where to find us.
In case you didn't know who we are, I'm Brittany Gobble, and this is my husband, Dr. Johnny Gobble, DVM.
And you never say it that way.
I know, you can't put doctor at the beginning and DVM at the end.
Yeah.
Okay. So hi, I'm Brittany, and this is my husband, Johnny Gobble, DVM. Okay, I'm sorry guys, my caffeine has kicked in. So, today we're going to do a video that we have had a lot of requests. The last video got a lot of attention.
So we're going to talk about Nidovirus again. If you've seen the last video, you've heard a lot of our information. If you haven't seen it, you can go check it out. It's on our YouTube channel.
And I'll put it in the comment section here, so if you want to click it, you can go back.
That way you can watch that one too. The last one was our opinion more than anything. My opinion as a veterinarian that has done a lot of snake work, and also I've done a lot of research with other veterinarians with some of the labs that run these Nidovirus tests. I've talked with some of them personally. I've talked with some of the breeders. So we had a basis in the beginning of the video. When that video came out, we said, tell us your story. So we've had a few people contact us with their stories, whether it be over email, whether it be through Facebook, whether it be even on the phone where they just call us straight up and want to talk. And some of these stories can go into 2 or 3 hour long conversations because they want feedback from me as a veterinarian also.
That has actually, I just want to interject, that has been amazing, you guys. Like, the reaching out, and what I really loved about it is a lot of these people reaching out, they are so excited for us all to be sharing information, you know, and because that's the only way. The more information we share, the better we are going to be able to be as breeders, and the better we can do for our animals, and the better we can educate the public. So, you know, not like trying to spread fear or anything like that, but just the more information and the more sharing, the better off. So I love that, you know, people were willing to reach out, and even some anonymously, but reach out and kind of just add to this knowledge base and give us permission to add their story to this anonymously. You know, I think I love that. I love that the community was like, yes, let's talk. Let's have a conversation without, you know, bickering like toddlers.
I agree. And again, when we share these stories, we do not tell names. So again, if you want to contact us after this video, we're not going to share your name with anyone. We don't, even when we talk to other people, unless it's somebody who knows the other person personally and they know the story already. We've had that happen. And we've talked about that situation differently, but on camera, we never tell names.
Oh, and if you have something you want to add, or you have questions, or you're having issues, if you want to call and block your number and call or whatever, like, what is it, hide the number?
We've had that happen on one.
Yeah, so that way there's no name, there's no phone number, there's no information, because we're not looking to talk about anybody's business.
Yeah, and the thing is people are still afraid, because Nido is a virus that's being portrayed as very scary, and there's a lot of breeders out there that are afraid that if they tell someone they've got Nidovirus, no one will ever buy snakes from them again, which is a big possibility. So it's one of those situations to where we understand the nervousness behind it. So again, it's all anonymous as far as that goes. In this video, we're going to talk about, there's a few things with the whole Nido-free situation. There's a lot of people that want their facilities to be Nido-free, so we're going to touch on what that might mean and what it could look like, and what it means in other animals. We're also going to talk about a few cases that do not fit the mainstream. We have this is how it's supposed to look, but these stories do not fit the mainstream exactly. We're going to try to talk about a few other things in the situation of, should you even breed a snake with Nidovirus or not? And if we have any information that we've repeated, we're sorry.
We're sorry. We don't want to sit and watch another video. We already had to sit through it.
We're going to try to make this video shorter.
Yeah, we're going to make it shorter, and we also, we're going to try not to repeat it, but sometimes on these points we're going over, and in case someone is just watching this for the first time, there might be a point or two that we repeat. So apologies for that.
And when I tell the stories, we're going to interject these topics in there that we want to talk about. So one of the first stories that came to us after the last video is there was a gentleman that contacted, and this was blocked number and everything. He didn't want to give a name or anything. He was getting started in the hobby. He had some ball pythons. If I remember correctly, it was somewhere between 20 and 30, and one of them was extremely sick. And he went to a veterinarian with it, and the veterinarian was worried about it being just some sort of respiratory complex thing, knowing there's Nido out there, knowing there's a lot of other respiratory complexes. So they decided to do the test for Nidovirus and a few others, and it came back positive for Nidovirus. And during this time, the gentleman, the breeder, decided to test every snake, and he has gone above and beyond. He's tested every single snake, because it was a small collection, every single snake, every single month. And at this point, when he contacted me, it had been already 9 months. Since then, it's been longer, but it had been 9 months.
This guy I was so impressed because his detail, it is terrifying. Like with all the stuff that's out there, the first thing is like, Nido, put in the freezer or euthanize it or whatever. Like people don't, like they're scared and they don't want any ties to it. And this guy had kept such great records. He was very methodical, great records, and just, this is what we need. This is the kind of information that the community and vets and stuff need.
Yes, I agree. So the veterinarian gave him a round of antibiotics like veterinarians would do for a snake with a respiratory problem. The guy did not want to euthanize the Nido-positive snake. When the first test came back, there was 4 other snakes in his collection that had it. They were not showing clinical signs. Veterinarian decided not to treat those snakes. The first snake got over it, but after about 2 weeks off the antibiotics, it started having respiratory problems again and started going downhill. Then he tested all his snakes, not just the ones that was positive. He's tested all of his snakes again because he wanted to make sure to get us a small collection. Yeah, the next month. So now we're talking about 2 months later. Funny enough, all of them but the original were negative on the second test. So, and let's back up and finish the story. Then he kept testing them, and they have been negative on every test after that, except for the first one. The first one was positive first test, positive second test, and kind of went downhill and was euthanized at a later date.
So you've essentially have a collection where the gentleman did all the testing, and he only lost one. There were multiple positives, and he only lost one, and then positives that were not treated became negative, which goes against some of what we know, but viruses adapt. Viruses change and adapt, and immune systems change, so this is really interesting information. I also want to add real quick that he went into lockdown on these snakes. No snakes out, no snakes in. No snakes out, no snakes in. He's actually bred them. Yeah. And he will not place
the babies.
He does have some other reptiles, but they are in a completely separate building. He is doing this like he is like hazmat. He is very, very cautious because he wants to learn. He wants to be able to help the community, but he also is not going to risk, making a mistake or anything like that. So I just wanted to say that he went into he didn't choose to euthanize, but he went into hardcore lockdown. And that way you know that these aren't new exposures because he's not bringing new animals in.
Correct.
Only what was first there and what was positive and then was, not.
And I told him if he's breeding them so far, as long as the eggs were taken away and the mother did not incubate the eggs, he incubated them artificially like a lot of breeders do, those babies should be negative anyway. So he is, in his mind, he'll probably place the offspring later, but he's not going to until they're negative on 3 tests. Because he is doing the rule, 3 tests over 6 to 9 months. That's the standard rule in our facility or in our industry. So, which means that if you test your snake, it's negative. You test it again in 2 to 3 months, it's negative. Test it again in 3 to 6 months, it's negative. That should be a negative snake. That should be a snake that does not have Nido. But now here's the problem with this story. The ones that were positive, the labs will tell you there's no such thing as a false positive. Many breeders have told me that. So that means that those 4 that were positive, was it 4? It was 4.
Yeah.
Anyway, those that were positive should be positive based on that research. So there's 2 or 3 things we have to think about in this situation, and this is what I think about as a veterinarian. If they are positive, why are they negative now? And many people will say, oh, they're not shedding the virus. No, it's been 9 months. They're still not shedding the virus. Maybe they haven't been stressed out enough. They've gone through breeding. Still not shedding the virus. Okay, so we should probably ship them somewhere and see if that causes it. But anyway, so a lot of people will say that they still have it. It's just not being shed and they're not showing clinical signs. Second option is maybe there is natural immunity to it, which the research vets have not found and the labs have not found. So this is something that I just made up. But we have seen this in a lot of other animals where they'll get a disease and natural immunity does kick in and at least try to clear the virus or could even possibly clear the virus.
Yeah, if you have something that contagious,
yeah,
then it should, if it was this contagious and there was no natural immunity being built, then the ball python should be wiped out at this point.
There should be a lot more positives.
There should be a lot more.
And what we said in the last video is that the researchers have found there's not really an increase in the amount of tests coming into their studies.
That are positive.
That are positive. The third thing is that there is such a thing as a false positive. And those snakes that tested positive really didn't have the virus, which again goes against what most places are teaching, what most people are saying. But I know in vet school I was taught that there is no such thing as a foolproof test, and that could change. But again, we've heard stories of not just Nidovirus testing, but there is a gentleman that we know that does a lot of testing, and he talks about how pregnancy tests are supposed to be accurate. Come in, positive, you're pregnant. Do another one later on, positive, you're still pregnant. Oh, well, let's do an ultrasound. There's no baby there. Oh, well, what's going on? Did we lose the baby? Well, there's no signs of that. It means the test was a false positive. And these pregnancy tests are supposed to be very, very accurate, which means if you're positive, you should be positive. Negative does not mean you're negative 100%, but positive should mean that you're positive. And that's the Nido teaching, the Nidovirus test teaching. And again, I'm not trying to stir up controversy. Those are the 3 things that come to my mind when I hear this gentleman's story. Because here he is, 9 months, 9 tests, all negative but the original.
And he's continued testing the entire collection.
He's still testing.
And there have been no other positives. And from what we understood from the story, the snake that passed away from Nido, the one that was positive originally, showed the signs and went downhill, was exposed to other snakes than just those 4.
Yeah.
So, and he hadn't been doing extra precautions. So that's why he took the whole facility into lockdown, was he did not want to risk, because he didn't know who had been exposed. So now you've got 9 months with who knows how many have been exposed. And, again, this could be, we still have so much to learn, but this can be a really positive thing because it could, in fact, be signs of them building an immunity. I think you told me about the Rottweilers.
Yes.
That, they had the disease.
So let's talk about I was going to do this later, but let's talk about a announcement she brought up. When I got out of school, parvo had just started getting really big in the dog world. And if you have anything to do with dogs, you know that parvo is a deadly disease. And when it first came out, veterinarians did not know what's going on. We did not know how to treat it. We did not know how to vaccinate for it. And it killed a lot of dogs. And on the list of dogs, there were, certain breeds that are highly susceptible. If a certain breed got parvovirus, it was almost guaranteed to die no matter what we did. Rottweilers were one of those. They were one of the biggest. When they came in, they were the worst ones with the signs, and they would crash and burn, and within a week's time, they would die. And if you had a Rottweiler in my office, I would tell you I probably cannot save it from this parvovirus infection.
And you have a great parvo surviving.
Now we have a great parvo for sure. Now, we could probably save 80% of them, and only about 20% of them actually do pass away from it, and it's getting less than that.
In general.
And dogs in general. But anyway, so after about 8 to 10 years of these Rottweilers just dropping dead from parvovirus, and even if they were vaccinated, they could get it and die. So it was really bad on those. But after about 8 to 10 years, we noticed, hey, it's not so bad on Rottweilers anymore. They started pulling through. They started responding to vaccines better so that they have better immunity, and they weren't even showing any signs of parvovirus if they were exposed to it. So what happened? Well, they started researching because there is a lot of money in mammals, so there's people that were donating.
And it devastated.
It devastated
the Rottweiler breeders were, I mean, they were losing massive amounts of bloodlines, and it was like, are we going to lose a breed?
Yeah.
At this point, that's how scary this was.
So they did a lot of research, and what they have come up with is that the virus actually destroyed all of the dogs that were more susceptible, so they could not pass their genes on, and the only Rottweilers that survived had a partial to almost a full immunity to the parvovirus. Those would be passed on to their offspring. So now we have Rottweilers that are not really as susceptible, if even at all, versus another dog. And that's just because it killed all the ones that couldn't naturally fight it off. So that's where she's going with this natural immunity. Is it starting to occur in the ball pythons? Has it been there? And we're only seeing some of these horror stories.
Well, yeah, because you think back, when a lot of this first research started coming out, or earlier, there were a lot more wild caughts even coming in. So you've got wild caughts in that F1, that first generation, second generation, they would not have had the chance always to be exposed to this versus, you got a 4-gene banana, you got a, 4-gene recessive.
It's been bred in captivity for a while.
Which means it's got a pretty good chance of having got some good genes in there that may have helped to, either help it to partially fight this off or completely. Maybe there's some of them are not as susceptible, We know that there's a lot of boas that can be asymptomatic carriers and not die from it because their immune system. So again, this is not research that's been...
Yeah, I was going to say, this is not research. This is mine and her opinion.
Based on work in other breeds.
Other breeds of animals and stuff like that. And again, we don't want to step on anybody's toes, so you researchers out there that's watching this, don't call me up and tell me all kinds of crazy stuff. If you want to discuss it, though, I love to discuss it. But we're just trying to let you know what we think about when someone calls us. And that's one of the things that this gentleman and I talked in great length. And we talked about the babies in great length. And here's the other kicker I'm going to throw out at you. Right now, once again, if you have your snakes and they are negative on 3 tests over 6 to 9 months, you're supposed to be negative. Well, you have some positives. Again, are they still positive? Some people would say yes, they're just not shedding the virus. But here's the problem. This guy was completely honest with me as far as I know. He had no reason to lie. Again, it was even an anonymous phone call so he could just spill his beans. But what if this guy or another person had a positive snake, did the same thing, and he wanted to be a Nido-free facility, and he just throws away those first tests on those other snakes that were positive, but now he's got 3 negative tests. Are we going to call him Nido-free, Nidovirus-free? By definition, he shouldn't be, because we know he had positives at one time, but if he didn't tell anybody, he could call himself that. So that's something you have to think about. That's, again, going into the, what does it mean to be your facility be Nido-free? And I'm going to touch on that with the other animals here shortly. All right. So another breeder story. And, well, let me back up. I've heard other breeders say exactly what this breeder has said. I've had 2 or 3 other breeders contact me and say, I had a positive snake, and now it's negative on the test. What do we do? And it's difficult because, again, if you're keeping this snake and you're keeping it isolated and you go, okay, it's negative 3 times, what do I do? Do I put it back in the general population? Well, you shouldn't based on what we know now and what's being said. But at the same time, you have a perfectly healthy snake. What are you going to do with it? Which goes back to a breeder, and I may have told this in the last video, he had a very expensive snake that was positive and no clinical signs. Did not want to euthanize, did not want to, cull it or anything like that. So we discussed it, and he has decided to take, is a male, he's decided to take 2, 3 females and place with this snake, knowing that they're at risk, and those 3 females would never go back into his main population. And that way, he could get eggs and hopefully get some offspring with the good genetics from the male. And again, so far the research has said that it doesn't transfer into the egg, but he's going to test the offspring anyway, once again, like most people are doing that have this problem. And if they're negative, he's going to place them. And as far as I know, and again, we just said this during our little pause, if you're hearing your story and you want to give us an update, we'd love to hear it.
And we don't know how to reach out to you.
We don't know how to reach out to some of the people, so because they were anonymous and I don't keep the numbers, or they came through as a whim. Now this gentleman is a friend of someone we know, so I'm sure.
Know this gentleman.
Yeah, so we know how to get in touch with him, but we just haven't yet. But I would love to know if we got viable offspring, if the male started showing signs during breeding and stuff like that.
I wanted to say one thing real quick on the
Okay.
eggs.
Okay.
When he's saying that the virus should not be on the eggs or transmissible through the eggs, do keep in mind though, if you had a nido-positive female and she's coiled around those eggs, so that anything from her mouth, her nose, or even because of the bedding,
it's in the stool too.
It's in the stool, the bedding. Odds are the virus could be, if she is shedding at that time, because you can show signs, and that's usually when you're shedding, but you can also not show signs but still be shedding.
So it would be on the surface.
It would be on the surface, but by the time they hatch, that is past
the research is in 14 days the virus should die on its own in
so,
the environment. So it should die on its own, but most people that are doing this are actually wiping the eggs when they put them in the incubator if they can, with something that's not toxic, like a novel sand, which is a chlorhexidine solution, or even just water. Just wiping it with water sometimes will mechanically remove this virus. And I think we touched on that in the last video a little bit, but that's what a lot of people are doing. And there has been more than one or two breeders and a couple of research facilities that have tested offspring out of the eggs and shown that they were negative. So
yeah. And it makes sense for the offspring. I just wanted to clarify that the eggs
they could,
at birth, or not at birth, at laying.
Well, if you have a positive female and you test that egg, as soon as it comes out of her or shortly thereafter, it could show up positive from the shell. Yeah. But that doesn't mean it's inside the egg. Inside the baby.
It's no different than if you wipe the bin.
Yeah.
The bin could be positive, and the bin isn't alive. So it's no different. It's just that transfer, and it would be dead past that 14 days by the time the baby's hatched. Just keep that in conscience. If you are working and you're trying to, the same thing, if you're trying to keep up with this, to add more information to the general pool for breeders, just keep in mind to be, for that first little bit, if you're touching or messing with the eggs, wash your hands.
Or wear your gloves. A lot of people still wearing their latex gloves and handling their snakes that way. So going back to the story, we've had multiple breeders say, I've got a positive snake that's now negative, what do we do? And I don't have an answer. If I were your vet, I'd have to advise keep it isolated. And certain people can, and some people cannot keep them isolated. So it's just a situation that you have to decide on your own. So
and that can throw a sticky situation, depending on what we learn. And this goes back to the other animals in the cat world. And I can't remember, this is the one I don't know if I mentioned last time, so I'm going to mention it real quick again. There are certain viruses that the breeders like to say, oh, we're, this virus free, we're this virus free, and they would advertise it. And kitten owners would rush to purchase from this breeder because they were like, oh, that virus sounds terrifying and I don't want it. But we knew that breeder had the virus, but what she was doing is she knew when they stress to breed or whatever, after that, they would clear up, and she'd test them right then because they're not shedding that virus.
So they'd be negative on the test.
Right, and then she'd do it the next year at the same time. And that way, she had negative tests every year, but if you caught her at a different time or you looked at her photos, you could see the cat's actually, like the eye gunk and the snot and everything. So, of course, we're still learning about this virus. We don't know. Is it in remission? Can it, there's a lot we need to learn about how this virus does work. It could work different strains. We don't know. But keep that in mind, that there is the potential that if this is something that stress can, make it fluctuate or something, I'm sorry, people can sometimes, I like to think people are always great, but
some people can manipulate the data for their benefit.
Yeah, so keep in mind that, that's wonderful. You want a breeder that's taking care of their animals. But just keep in mind that, sometimes that could be a little bit, breeders can game the system too.
Yeah.
And that wasn't about any breeder. I don't know anyone doing that.
No, we're giving you scenarios because we have lived a lot of them through other species. I've raised horses in my life, and if anybody's in the horse world, they know that there's crooked people and everything, but I remember seeing registration papers matched to a horse that was not registered so they could sell it as registered. That's one thing. We were in the cat world where it's stab you in the back. We're in the dog world where it's almost the same. So we've got some of these other things. And as a veterinarian, I've got a lot of livestock worlds that I belong to and how things are tried to shove them under the table so no one knows. So that's where all this comes from.
we used to, on our cats, had to get echocardiograms of their hearts every year to make sure that they didn't have heart disease. Hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, where the heart enlarges. And that can change very quickly. So you do it every year to make sure that as soon as a cat showed any kind of sign, you could pull it from the breeding pool and make sure that that genetic did not continue, more and more babies. And there were many, many cases where we stopped. Originally we would post the whole form so people could see the measurements for themselves and say, oh yeah, that is it's negative, it's HCM clear, blah, blah, blah. And we had to stop doing that because people started copying them.
Taking our forms. Whiting out our cat's information.
Yep, and then putting their cat's information in, and they were using them to sell them to buyers. And then some breeders and some buyers realized, like, wait a minute, why are they in Florida and using a Tennessee cardiologist or vice versa? And so, just again, keep that in mind that just because you get a Nido, I want to see it. I want to see your Nido free, or I want to see your Nido positive. It could also be photoshopped off the internet. I'm just putting it out there.
Very well. So again,
this is food for thought.
Food for thought.
Yeah.
So, all right. So second breeder story that's a little different than I've got a positive snake, what do I do with it, or a positive snake that turns negative. And again, a lot of breeders, I can think of 5 really close to us right off the bat that, boom, I've got a positive snake and now it's negative. Or I got a positive snake and nobody else is negative. Nobody else is positive. So here's another story. And this story just makes you think about what you would do in a situation if you got a positive snake. So breeder A has baby snake. Breeder A places baby snake with breeder B. Breeder B keeps baby snake for a short amount of time, and as far as I know did not breed the snake, and places it with breeder C. Breeder C breeds the snake to a few females successfully, and then breeder D gets it, and breeder D gets it and tests it and is positive, does a second test, is positive, and decides that he doesn't want the snake in his facility. Breeder C does a lot of quarantine and does a lot of testing. Breeder B does a lot of quarantine and a lot of testing. And breeder A, I don't know much about. So here's 4 breeders involved with a snake that's positive. And breeder C is taking the blunt of it because breeder C had it right before it went to breeder D, and breeder D has the positive.
And these aren't like quarantining just a few feet away.
No, these are people that have separate rooms. They've all spoken to me. Well, breeder A hasn't spoken to me. Breeder B, C, and D has all spoken to me about their whole facility, how it's a separate room. It's a 6 months to a year quarantine time. It is the 3 test when it comes in, test 3 months, test 6 to 9 months. And it's even one of those situations to where if anything sneezes, it's out of there no matter what until it's cleared. So these people do a meticulous, great job at quarantine and testing.
Yeah, one of them, if they even think it's a risk, they actually just pay to have the vet quarantine it.
Yeah.
It's not even in their facility.
It's not even in their facility.
So these are the top tier. These breeders are top tier as far as how careful they are with all of these animals. Like, they won't even bring a new animal in while animals are in quarantine because they're like, well, then it has to start all the animals quarantine back at day 1 because they won't let them come out of the room until they've been exposed to nothing.
All of them is quarantined.
Correct. So this is like very careful. Things shouldn't be slipping through the cracks on this.
Yeah. So breeder C feels real bad and basically is trying to do anything because, I had it before the positive test. But breeder C has tested every single snake again since that has happened. Everything was tested previously, but everything is tested again, all being negative, and is being tested a second time with no clinical signs. And besides just the exposed ones, there are the ones that around this snake in the same rack and even into neighboring racks that are also being tested. So far, there's been no positives. Again, as a breeder, how do you deal with this? Are you going to say, okay, I got a positive test because it was in my facility first? Because here, as a veterinarian, again, we study epidemiology, we study how these diseases are spread and everything, and we have stories from various people either on the internet or personally contacting us or contacting us from another breeder contacting us about a story where they're claiming that the virus lays dormant for, one person has said over a year, another person says 2 years. Some of the research vets say probably 6 months before it would break. That's where they get the 6 to 9 month quarantine. So there's a lot of people out there saying it's laying dormant. So did this snake come from breeder A, breeder B, or breeder C? And right now, breeder C is taking the blunt of it. He's decided that he's going to be responsible. He's saying, okay, I'm going to test all mine. Made the ordeal correct as far as I know everything. So, but if it happened to you, how would you deal with it? What if breeder B kept a snake for a year and then it came to you and it wasn't tested in between all of these? How's that going to work? Because it's not showing clinical signs, or it was tested in the very beginning when it came in a facility, but you kept it for 2 years and then you placed it. How do you do that? And then we go back to the first person's story who had a positive test but then has all these negative tests. He wants to sell one of those. What if it goes to you and it's not positive but it's positive 6 months later? Where did it come from? This is what I think about when people talk to me, and this is where I want you to think about, because it's just not easy black and white. It's not easy, oh, it had to come from this breeder because it's positive in my facility. Well, we also talked about incubation time. What if you didn't test, what if you tested on day 1 is negative, but day 7 is positive? Because sometimes incubation time, what if it started showing signs right as it was shipped? We don't know. These are all questions that we have to answer for ourselves. And it is hard. It is hard because you want to do the best for your animals, you want to do the best for your clients, but that's just one story. And again, in these stories, we're not trying to step on toes, make people mad, whatever the case may be. We don't even want to be upset. And if you are upset, we do apologize for that, because that's not what we're trying to do. We just want you to think about all these things.
Look at this. Like, this is actually my kitchen. You're just hanging out with us in the kitchen.
We're just talking about it.
We're barbecuing hot dogs and hamburgers, and we're just chatting. That's what this is. Because a lot of times people really do want to talk to Johnny about it or mention, think of this as a hangout. This isn't like a, let's proof it and put it in a magazine type of thing. This is just like, hey, did you hear about this? And, here's some theories as to how. This is just, again, like we said before, food for thought, interesting conversation or debate or whatever you want to do with it. But
I don't want to write a paper on this. I've written a few papers in my career, and the last one I did was on ball pythons. It takes a lot of work, you get a lot of editing, you get ridiculed by a lot of the professionals in the world, your peers, because it has to be peer reviewed. I don't want to do Nido in a paper. I'd rather give the information to someone else and let them put it in a paper.
And I want to add one thing real quick too, and I do think we said this in the other video, but it's a point I want to reiterate. Keep in mind that as humans and as doctors, a lot of our opinions, there is fact, and then there is also experience. So, a vet that may have treated snakes with Nidovirus, maybe some of those survived, or maybe all of them survived. So that vet is like, oh, it's survivable. Here was a treatment that worked. And you know what? Maybe he's treating, we've talked in the last one about bloodlines, that it could be depending on how a certain bloodline. Maybe somebody kept a lot of pied, a lot of dreamsicles out of something, and it kind of went through that little, community. And maybe those were more susceptible. So that vet, is treating this, and a different vet is treating, the Tennessee ball pipe. Like, you don't know. Yeah. And that's what I want to say is that, just because a vet says no, the Nidovirus, Serpintovirus,
it's got different names.
It's fatal. It's always fatal. Yeah. In my experience, it's always fatal. Okay? In his experience, it is. That doesn't make him wrong. He is practicing, and he is practicing in that area with what he is seeing. Mm-hmm. Whereas another vet may say, I've only ever seen one. I have tested 50 of them, and there's only ever been one positive. again, keep in mind that, in practice, vets are basing it on what they see. Researchers are basing it on the information that they are given documentation and access to. So there is still way more questions than there is answers. And at this point, I don't think any person can be like, I am 100% right, I have this nailed down, or the other way. Like, we all need to learn from each other. And again, different people have different experiences. So, because I've seen that online where, one vet is like, won't even treat. And then one vet is like, it's not that big of a deal. Give it an antibiotic and,
We're going back to parvovirus. If
Yeah.
you got 5 vets in a room, we have 5 secret recipes to treat parvovirus, and they're not all the same. In fact, many of them will be different concoctions, because it is a virus and certain things work, and sometimes it works on different breeds. So,
Yeah.
Now, we get a lot of phone calls and emails and messages, but we did see one online where, and this is just another story, where someone had a quarantine facility testing, doing it right. Of course, these are coming from people that are really wanting to do it right. Had some positives. And veterinarian said, well, we can do this, we can do that. She got the positive test back, and that's what they were proceeding with. And lo and behold, in her main facility, there were 2 positives. So now that's a situation that you have to think about, how did that happen? According to the breeder, there was strict quarantine, strict cleaning, never going into the main facility after you've been into the quarantine facility, never cross-contamination, all that good stuff. So we as a community on Facebook, if you read through the comments, have kind of decided there must be some sort of fomite, and fomites are things that transfer viruses and bacteria, inanimate objects. Well, I guess it has to be inanimate. It can be a mouse. A mouse can be a fomite, where the virus is on the mouse, and the mouse runs into another room and exposes another animal. And I'm talking about wild mice, of course, because, well, some people may let domestic mice run around in their snake facility, but we try not to. But flies do this.
Those stupid little gnats.
The little gnats that get on the poop, and you can't get rid of them without a bug zapper and all this stuff. So people have those. So, and I want to tell this story because here's another story where someone has done so much work and tried to do it correctly, and still there was a failure.
And that is not to say, don't what does it matter? Why even bother?
Yeah, I do agree that you should do all these things.
Yes, I want to make it clear we're not like poo-pooing the idea of taking these extra cautions. Don't jump off here and go on Craigslist and get all the snakes that you can get from those fish tanks.
Yeah.
That's a real good way to find you a virus.
Or mites.
Or parasites or something.
Worms.
So again, do good by your animals and take care of them. And if you are a breeder, you do need to keep in mind that you're going to be supplying an animal to someone else, and there is a responsibility for that. In the exotic world, a lot of times we get to hand it off, and it's like, now it's your problem, and that's to some extent great. But on the flip side, these are people that are trusting us, and they're a lot of times investing in our projects or our work. Like when someone buys from us, it's like them giving you a high five, like you did good. I want to work with you. So, again, keep in mind that you should take the precautions. In our case, we are taking the precautions, but we are also not going crazy. We're not terrified of everything.
Well, and the reason why I wanted to tell that story is once again, in the community, if you get told in the world that, oh, they got Nidovirus, some people may not buy from you. But I want the community, and this is true for any disease in all the reptiles, not just ball pythons, the community needs to understand that you can do everything correct and still get a break in disease. And that's no reason to shun, that's no reason to blackball, that's no reason to say, I'm never buying a snake from that person. And the reason why I'm saying that is the reptile community overall has been nicer to us than any of the other species that we've been involved with. With the horses, with the cats, with the dogs, they're a lot rougher.
That people be crazy.
Yeah, they are crazy. So I don't want to see the reptile community to go down a rabbit hole of there's these people that do it this way, they don't do it that way, so you can't associate. And I know there's already cliques that exist, but so far the cliques will intermingle some. And that's why I told that story.
Yeah, and it's not a failure. That's the sad thing, and that's what a lot of the feedback we got is that people want to know about this. They want to know what they can do. We've had people come, we've had people watch the video and be like, wow, I actually feel less anxious now. Like, they were at a level like 10, like, DEFCON 1 or whatever. Like,
well, we had somebody message us and say, hey, I've read Nidovirus. Should I just go ahead and get rid of everything?
Yeah, they were going to just get
out of it.
Because
it's
they
like,
thought they were
wait.
they thought they were all going to die.
Yeah.
Like, it was just a guarantee. And then they were like, oh, okay, so precautions. But then we've had other people that came and they were like, that really helped us to implement some things that we hadn't, heard of. So again, it's not a failure to have a positive. Odds are that at some point, if you are working with reptiles and you're bringing new reptiles in, at some point, you're going to run across one. And because we don't understand how this works and how it pops up, how long it can be carried asymptomatically, because we still have a lot of questions, it can pop up. And I think it's just like, if a breeder has sent out and you're talking to the people and they're like, oh, 50, Nidoviruses, okay, that's a problem, and the breeder really needs to be,
needs to do something about it.
Yeah, needs to do something.
That's what makes a good breeder in anything.
Yeah, or
back up your product, back up your animals. I trust that this animal's healthy when I sell it to you.
Yeah, and like a good breeder's not going to want to risk animals' lives like that either. So again, if they're not taking responsibility or making changes and being like, whoa, I am so sorry. This, that's one thing. But again, one breeder hiding something or another breeder, odds are that really should just be a sign that they're actually testing and they're trying to do really well. They're trying to take care of the animals. They are also giving the animals a chance because this Nidovirus, upper respiratory, is so scary. There are other types of upper respiratory. There are, there was a horse at the barn where I used to ride, and this horse had an upper respiratory forever, nasty, like snot. They tested this thing for everything because they were like, what's wrong with it? What's wrong with it? They finally got it knocked out, and the vet brought some tools out, and it had a splinter this long lodged in it, but you couldn't see it from just, they had to laparoscopically do it. It looked, because it was infectious and everything, this horse looked like it had a really bad upper respiratory, but it got a piece of wood. How many of us keep wood chips? So you think about it, like, do you want a breeder to be like, I'm not going to test it, because then I'll have to say I got a Nido. So I'm just going to euthanize this animal, which may have got something up its nose, may got a fly up its nose. There's...
Who knows?
Or another cold. There is, not every upper respiratory is Nido. So again, we're not saying don't be cautious. That is definitely not the point of this video. We're just saying, think some other things through and find out what works for you, and then really be cool with people, because I think everyone that has contacted us and wants to talk to us, they are really excited to get to talk about this and have a way to talk about it without the judgment
or ridicule or
like
everybody attacking them.
Yeah, it's like, I think a lot of us have an underlying anxiety, because obviously anytime you don't understand something, you fear it more. So I really think that this should be, again, more of an open conversation and more like, okay, I got the positive, I did all the steps, it's a puzzle, let's all Sherlock Holmes this, Like, I think we could learn a lot more that way.
Yeah, I can agree with that. So now, I want to talk about trying to be a Nido-free. There's a lot of people want their facility to be Nido-free, and it's a good thing to try to do that, but it also can be a hard thing to do that. So I want to talk to you from a veterinarian standpoint. In the other animal world, the mammal world, and maybe even some of the exotic worlds out there, if you're free from a disease, there's a lot of stuff that has to be done. So I wanted to use an example of a deer herd that I used to take care of when I was practicing. Deers are exotic. They also can be food animal, but they can get a disease, tuberculosis. They can also get a disease, brucellosis. So both of those diseases are bacterial. They're not viral. And there is a program that's done in this country. Now, if you're in another country, I don't know how it's handled. This is in the United States. There is a program to where you can call your herd tuberculosis-free or clear, and brucellosis-free or clear. what it consists of. So this is where we may be going with this. What it consists of is a veterinarian who has been trained by USDA, which I was. I guess I still am, I'm just retired, to go to your farm either once a year, once every 3 years, or once every 5 years, depending on the state's requirement for that label. And I would test every deer on that property for brucellosis and tuberculosis. And in the deer herd, it was different. Brucellosis was annually, tuberculosis was every 3 years. But you had to do the whole herd. If there was a positive in any of the animals, another vet that's above me would have to come in and do a confirmation test. If that test was positive, pretty much you're shut down.
Also, just so you know, these are not pet deer.
No, they're not pet deer.
Like
we had to run them through a chute.
It's like
they're
barn.
Wild deer.
Yeah, it's a barn with a maze in it, and they run them through this barn, and they just go down this maze wall, and then they get to a chute that kind of pins them because these have antlers. These are not like cute little muntjac deer or something. These are big deer, and then they have to test every one.
We had to draw blood for brucellosis and do a tuberculosis test. If anybody's had one with their skin test, that's what we did in the deer.
Yeah, it is a long day of work, and that's just
all week.
Yeah,
it takes me a week to do his herd.
And they have to set up before that because they have to gather all the deer. Because if one's not in there, you can't say you're free.
You can't. So. And if the state vet, like I said, if they find a positive, the state USDA or state veterinarians, you're shut down. You're shut down. And with different diseases, it depends on the disease. If you get, in chickens, for example, if you get one of their diseases, they will come in and destroy your entire flock. So that is
every fowl.
Every fowl, not
on
just
your
chickens.
property.
Anything that could get that disease or even come close to carrying that disease. So that's the scary veterinary part that I've dealt with when you want to try to be NPIP free, which is chickens.
So like with chickens, a lot of people on eBay, you can buy hatching eggs.
And they'll say if they're NPIP free.
But legally, you're not supposed to actually ship hatching eggs unless you're NPIP.
Yep.
You're not supposed to even swap eggs.
You're not supposed to take them across state line. So these people that are just driving and picking them. Same goes for, let's talk about coggins and horses. My mom has 2 horses. Horses are not food animals. They're considered pets in the United States. Coggins is actually the name of the test. That's not the name of the disease. The disease is EIA, equine infectious anemia, and it's spread by mosquitoes. So it is a very scary disease in horses. In order for you to have a Coggins test, once again, a veterinarian who's been trained by USDA has to come out, draw the blood, send it to a lab. And then if you're positive, the state vet comes out, does a confirmation test. If you're still positive, that horse is either euthanized, and they don't do the entire herd, but they will test the entire herd multiple times. But that horse is euthanized, or now we can quarantine it a certain distance from all other horses. So that is what it means to have no EIA in your herd of horses and have negative Coggins. There's not a certification for that particular disease like there is in some of these others.
But you do have to have paperwork.
And if you sell it in a sale barn, state line, even to ride some of these horses in a park, you have to have a negative Coggins test.
And again, this is actually like a coloring sheet. Like they have to put all their markings. This is not an easy paperwork. A vet can do it, but this isn't like a cute little, I'm going to put my signature. This is a for real form to make sure you're testing the correct animals.
And those animals are matched up either through the description like she's talking about or microchip. On the deer, each one had a microchip and an ear tag to have the certification. Where I'm going with this big long story is, if you want to be a Nido-free facility and to the point that you know it's trustworthy, you know that the breeder's not lying, you know that the test is being done properly, veterinarians and the government are going to get involved. So you have to remember, if we're saying, here's a disease that's bad, it's horrible in ball pythons, it's killing X amount every year, the government's going to start looking at that as, well, do we need to control this disease? Is it going to go to our natural snakes or not? Is it going to spread? What's going to happen?
Are they going to lose them from their zoos because they let people come in and you're technically exposing them if they do any of the hands-on zoo things?
Yes.
So
is it contagious to people? Which it's not as far as we know, and we know it's really not spread to other snakes. But if the government gets involved with this and goes, oh, this is really deadly, hey, they're going to step in. And everybody knows the government's going to charge you money.
The other thing is scams. Because,
yes,
if somebody sells another person a $10,000 snake that ends up having Nido, and the breeder's like, that really wasn't me. I'm a Nido freak. Like, I don't have Nido.
And even a piece of paper that proves it, but if he did the testing himself or herself and fudged the test or did not do the test properly. Now, I want to interject there. There is a lot of videos online on how to do a swab properly. Please watch them. Please watch it before you even try to test the snake, because if you're not doing it properly, it's going to be negative.
Well, but then you have this buyer who is now going to report this as basically they got scammed out of $10,000. The government is going to step back and say, okay, wait a minute, they've got a disease that's spreading that might risk our wildlife, our reptiles in the wild, and now we got scams, and now they're spreading it because they're going to all these reptile shows,
across state lines without having the test done.
Yeah, so, we do as a community, I feel like, need to be cautious about, constantly, I don't want to say puffing it up, because it's there. We're not saying it's not there. There is Nidovirus, Serpentivirus, it is there. But we need to be careful to not turn it into this big scare thing, because we already fight for our rights as reptile keepers, and it's a slippery slope.
That's why we have USARC.
Yeah, we were USDA licensed.
Or USARC. Whatever.
Yeah, I've heard it both ways. We were USDA licensed for years.
With the cats.
With the cats.
And the dogs.
And the servals.
And the servals, yeah.
So we were USDA licensed, and it was a lot of work. They inspected everything. I mean, we're talking like, my cats had scratched a couple lines in my door, and I got dinged for that, because they said that if there was any kind of virus or parasite, it could have gotten in that.
Because it was wood behind it.
Because it was an impervious surface. So I had to repaint the door, and then she signed. I mean, what they come in and do is like, if one of my cats, I had one that got an injury to the eye. They were playing with another cat, and a nail got the eye. And I had to pull out the vet records, because you have to have a vet plan. You have to have a vet check your facility every year, a lot like the venomous people actually have to do. Then she would say, give me the record. I'd have to give her the record. She'd look at the record, say, give me the cat. We'd pull out the cat. I'd have to scan the microchip on the cat so she could make sure that this was the vet plan for that cat. Then I had to take her to the refrigerator and show her the medication so she could check that it was in date for that cat. So, again, I think that can be very wonderful.
Yep.
It keeps a lot of these, bad situations from happening. However, having said that, it can be a slippery slope of where we start losing our rights as pet keepers or reptile keepers.
Well, and that started. This inspection process in our breeding cats started because people were shipping cats to a buyer. They arrived sick or got sick very shortly thereafter, and they wouldn't do anything about it. So the buyer writes a complaint to the government, and there you go, because we ship cats or dogs, sight unseen is what it's called in their paperwork.
It wasn't just us, just to clarify.
Yeah, this came across the United States. Yeah.
It was the whole thing, and they didn't want sight unseen.
So that means that if you sell an animal where the person cannot see it and refuse to buy it because it might be sick, you're shipping them, which is the way a lot of snake people are, then they had to say, well, if you're not going to let them send it back, we're going to make it so you can't ship them to them if it's sick.
Yeah, and they said if you had more than 5 breeding females, so that was anything that was old enough to breed. It didn't matter if we didn't want to breed.
Yeah, if we bred it or not.
Yeah,
if they were intact females.
Like even pet. If you said it was a pet, because we had pet cats that were just our pets, altered. They had nothing to do with our breeding programs, and we still had to have the microchip and the health plan on the pets. So this is definitely one of those things where it was great because a lot of people were getting sick animals, but they said if you have more than 5, you're at a risk for passing diseases around. So now you can't ship unless you have a USDA license, and the airline started actually asking for that number to be able to make you a reservation.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not in any way trying to bash breeders. This is just keep in mind, one of the reasons that it's really great, I know a lot of people are like, oh, vets don't know, and yes, I will say that reptiles are not seen a lot by vets. So there's going to need to be a lot of education with vets, as with more classes, which there already is. The exotics are a lot bigger thing now. So there is going to be a learning process. Find you a good vet who's not afraid of snakes and is willing to keep learning and growing with you. I promise you, there are a lot more out there than you think there are. He goes to the vet conferences, and I mean, there is some, these people love reptiles. So
And they want to learn. They may not know the first time you walk in what you're doing with any reptile, not just ball pythons, but any reptile. But if they're willing to learn about them, they will do their research, they will take their classes, because that's what I did. And we typically expand our knowledge with each visit. And that's where I was going with this next thing, is many of these breeders, including our friends that are breeders, talk about how expensive vets can be in the reptile world. I mean, come on, you got 100 snakes, 3 of them got respiratory, you're going to take all 3 to the vet, that's 3 office visits. Now, some vets will say, no, it's just 1 office visit, but they may not. So you can easily have a $400 bill in 1 sick snake, and that doesn't even include a lot of the testing. So I understand vets can be very expensive in this hobby. And if we don't know a whole lot, which is what we're hearing from people, oh, my vet don't know anything, you all being the breeders, feel like it's a waste of money and time to go to a veterinarian. But you have to remember, you have to help them learn. If they're willing to learn, it's worth forming the relationship.
He actually had a breeder of dogs who worked with a very specific dog breed that had certain issues that were very prevalent in that breed, but not as much in other breeds.
Yeah.
And she found him and said, how much do you know about this dog breed? And he goes, I'm going to be honest. I've only seen a few of these. So I know the general dog here. And she said, well, I know a lot because I've been working with these for like 30 years. And she said, like, are you willing to let me kind of give you information? And he said, yeah, like, I want to learn. And in the end, he ended up seeing a lot of clients with that dog breed because he got known for having been open. And he'd be like, you're right. And even now, he would tell, like, other vets in the office before he retired, he would be like, no, don't use that on that breed. That's not going to work. Yeah. The same with the Sphinx cats. There was an antibiotic that vets always picked. That antibiotic does nothing in Sphinx cats. They have such a resistance to it that it's not going to work.
It's the bacteria that they have that has the resistance, because it's been passed around so much among the breeders.
Yeah, so again, find you a good breeder and build a relation, or a good vet.
A good vet.
And build that relationship. It's probably going to be expensive at first, but you're helping educate them, and which will help the whole reptile industry and other keepers. And eventually, good vets, they always start saying, you know what, no, I'm not going to charge you for all the snakes. If you think there's a problem, bring in the 3 that you think. You'll start finding that vets really respond to loyalty. And if your vet doesn't, maybe shop around a little. Like,
go from there.
I like mine so much, I married him.
So anyway, going back to the Nido free, it can be done. If we get a lot of regulation in there, sadly, it's going to be more expensive for all of us. Now, let's go back to what's being said now. Well, we can do it ourselves. That's true. If we test, we can do it ourselves. I'm going to give you some more food of thought, playing devil's advocate. 1, that means you have to trust that person that's doing the testing knows how to do the test right. You also have to trust that that person's being honest and didn't throw away their positive test. Because here's a scenario.
Or that they have a negative snake and they swab it every single time.
Yeah, they swab the negative snake and put everybody else's name on it. That's why veterinarians have to get involved with all these other regulations. But one of the things that you have to think about is, what if there's a positive test there? They cull that snake. It was in their facility. Everybody else is negative. Is it truly a negative facility? Because we know they have incubation times. We know they can go in dormancy and not shed the virus. We know you can have a snake that's positive with the virus that hasn't been stressed out, be negative on the test, and then 3 or 4 months later be positive. So are we truly negative? Even if this person says, I do have a negative or a positive snake, and I called it, I got it out, I sold it, euthanized, whatever, is that facility truly a negative facility? If it's not right then, is it negative after 3 tests over 6 to 9 months? Because that's the standard that we're using right now.
And who is going to make that the standard? Because in theory, if I have 30 snakes, 1 is positive, and I euthanize a snake and throw away the test, my buyer could come the next day and I can say I'm Nido free. You want to see a test for all 29, every single snake? Every single snake. They don't know. Tell me, really, any of you all know your friends that have decent sized facilities know exactly how many snakes they have? You don't know, because you don't know when they're sending one to someone else. So again, they have no reason to test 3 times. And then you wouldn't know when is the test, like if I show you a test, are you going to know if it was a year, like, was that the last of the 3 tests, or is that the first? Like,
or who's going to inspect? Like if I'm selling Brittany a snake through the mail, She says, are you not afraid? I say, yes. She wants to see every test, all 3 tests over 90 days, or 9 months. No one's going to really do that. And if they do that, that breeder's probably not going to sell to them.
Yeah, because, I mean, let's be honest.
I'm not going to spend an hour of life emailing tests to someone for the snake when I can sell it to someone else if it's healthy.
Yeah,
I mean, that's just the way I am. Now, another breeder may be different, that's fine, but I'm not going to spend all that time. I don't have that much time.
No, and especially not if you have, you know, a buyer who is just like, oh, I love it, I want it now. You know, we have some snakes where there's 3 people that want the same animal, and they're waiting to see who, you know,
who doesn't get it.
If this person don't buy it, then this one wants it next chance at it. You know, I'm going to be honest, as a breeder, I'm going to go with the one. Like, I'm going to go in order, but if there's any time where it's like, oh, I got the emails at the same time, I'm going to go with the one who's just like, where's your PayPal? Not the one that wants a full certification on the entire facility. And saying that that's needed is going to just attract the government. Like, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, people. And again, I do think that there are times where it has really helped to make sure, like, clean up some of these meals and stuff like that with mammals. I just do worry because, like in France, you can't even breed 2 cats without taking both cats to a veterinarian.
Who scans them, identifies them,
make sure it says, yep, that's that one, that's this one.
and you're breeding those together.
Yes, and then you have to bring the whole litter back, and he gives them a microchip, and he signs them off, and then they get to submit it to get the registration paper to be able to show them and all that, because they have to make sure, the vet's making sure that they're not lying about who the parent is, or...
And in horses and dogs, there's even DNA testing to prove parentage now, before you can register the litters in certain situations. We just had a dog, we shipped semen overseas, or not overseas, across the country, could not register the litter without DNA on mom and dad both, so we could test the babies for DNA.
And some of those dog DNA, they actually automatically submit them to a database.
Yep.
You can choose not to, but you can't choose, like, I only want part of it submitted. Like, if one thing was like, oh, it's a carrier of this, which is not necessarily a problem as long as you don't breed it to another carrier or a dog with this problem. You can't say, leave that one off, but put the rest up. They submit it, but it's the vet and the labs who are submitting it, not the individual who could fudge information.
Yeah, that's the problem. You have to trust that everybody in the community is being honest all the time. Because again, the first story I told, positive in the beginning, others were positive, but now they're negative. And he's done the testing to be able to say he's nidal-free. And I also think this is where when someone comes in and says, I've got a positive snake in my facility, what do I do? And they're wondering if they need to get rid of every single snake in the facility. And that's scary, because you're talking about selling them as pets, which I wouldn't recommend.
That's
Definitely not selling them as breeders.
You're watching
Or
your dreams
are you going to euthanize every single snake in the facility because you got the positive? Well, that's what they do with chickens. You got a positive, they kill everything. And then they tell you can't bring them onto your property again for X amount of time before you can start over.
And could you imagine, like, if you're a breeder who's been working those lines for generations, and then you just lose everything? I mean, it's truly, truly devastating.
Yeah.
And I want to say, one of the other risks with breeders is, and again, like, this is, I'm a wonderful breeder. So going back to the cat world, there was a large portion of amazing cat breeders. I'm talking top tier cat breeders. And because they didn't want to pay the vet bills, like expensive, they did a lot of their own vaccinations. And typically rabies, of course, in the US, rabies is done by a vet. It's really that way around the world, but some breeders will fudge it. Some of the reasons for this is you have no way of knowing if the vaccine was kept properly, which means if you didn't do that right, then it didn't work. It's useless. But what they were doing is there's certain viruses that a kitten is more susceptible to before it's like a year. It can get it later, but there's a couple that, like, just like parvo, if they get exposed to it, the breeders were noticing that when they gave these vaccines, the full dose of the vaccine, the kittens were getting a little upper respiratory. Think about it, if you have kids, you know, like, they get the little fever and they get the sniffles and they're whiny after you go get vaccines, right? Kittens can do and puppies can do pretty much the exact same thing. Well, the breeders didn't like that, which it's actually an immune response, but the breeders didn't like that. They're like, it's just too hard. They started half dosing. And I'm talking top tier cat breeders, we're like top level, wonderful people who stood behind their animals, love their animals to death, are doing half doses. But what they're doing is they're writing on the paperwork that they were fully vaccinated. Well, then these animals go out, and a portion of them started dying from these very preventable diseases. And the buyers are like, I don't understand why. I went to a breeder, they vaccinated, I have it on the record, the vet wrote that on their record. These are not people that were trying to manipulate. They weren't even trying to cheap out. It wasn't like they didn't want to pay for the full vaccine. They truly thought they were doing the best for the animal and doing the best of their knowledge. So that's one of the things is like, it's not just like people are, devious. How can I do this?
Yeah, they could be doing it unknowingly.
Yeah.
Again, watch the videos on how to test, how to swab, because a lot of failure is going to be there. That's human error.
Yeah.
Make sure you're using the proper labs. There's 2 big ones in this country that do a lot of these tests, but there's also a lot of other labs that can do these tests, and some of them are better than others. So I do want to touch on the testing procedure that I would recommend. Of course, this is, again, up for hot debate, but if you get a positive snake, if I get a positive heartworm dog practicing medicine, heartworms is deadly to dogs. If I get a positive, there is a treatment, but the treatment's expensive and dangerous. It is recommended by all the veterinarians, all the research, that I do a second test. Now, they recommend doing a second different test. Not the same one from the same lot. Try a different test, whether it's a different procedure of the test, whether it's a different manufacturer of the test. They want to try to not do the exact same test. Because if that test that you ran is positive, and it's a false positive, this is going to false positives, the next test is made exactly the same way, testing exactly the same snake, or in this case the same dog for heartworms. There's a very good chance it's going to show up positive too, and it could still be false. So we do one test, it's positive. It's a quick snap test that we do in-house. If we get a positive, we either send out another blood sample to a different lab, or we do a test in-house using a microscope looking for the baby worms in the blood, or we have a second set of tests made by a different manufacturer that we can run in-house.
And my ladies, if you're all watching, if any of you have had babies, you all know, like, you get a pregnancy test and you're really excited, but then you're scared. Most of us have ran out and bought 3 different brands. They're all testing for
the same
hormone
stuff.
But for some reason, some will show up sooner, some show up later, some don't show up, or one will say negative, and then you take the other one and it says positive because it's a little more sensitive or whatever. So, this isn't it's not done in other things. It
is done in a lot of things.
Yeah.
Like I said, heartworm pregnancy. And I've had a lot of breeders tell me this story where they got a snake and they got it back because the person they sold to tested it was positive. When they got it back, they used a different lab and it was negative. And then they did it again and it was negative. And they did it again and it was negative.
And both labs are reputable.
And both labs in this country are very reputable. We've heard that one lab tests for different strains than the other lab. I don't know. I haven't talked to him about that. I didn't know there was all these multiple strains. It makes logical sense, though, because there's multiple strains of every virus.
We talked about that in the first video, that we
Yeah.
thought it was a possibility.
Yeah, like the herpes virus in cats has multiple strains. Same virus, just different a little bit, more infective.
There's we call them hot strains.
Hot strains or not.
You knew there's certain breeders that if your cat's got exposed to them at a show and your cat broke with it, you knew you were going to be fighting. You might lose the cat. The cat might end up with scar tissue.
This brings up another debate, though, because here's the problem. If you're testing for multiple strains and not all the labs, not just the 2 big ones, but not all the labs in the United States are testing for all those strains, you get a positive over here because it's got 6 strains on this test, and this test only has 5 strains, so it missed one. It could be negative, but it's still positive snake.
And that's just an example.
That's just an example.
Yeah,
so that's something else to think about.
Because it's likely as we learn more, that as the world learns more about these, the researchers and doctors, that is going to be more of a possibility.
So I recommend, if you get a positive snake, using a different lab to test it again. And you may want to wait a couple of days in between the tests. Don't want to wait long because then it could be asymptomatic and not shedding the virus. You may not want to do it the exact same days in case there's a contaminant there. But most people are not going to do it the exact same day because they're going to get the test back usually 24 to 48 hours, test the snake again, send it to a different lab. And again, watch how to do the proper swabbing. I think that's where most of the failure is going to occur. The proper handling of the test when you're done. You don't want to contaminate it by laying it somewhere. You don't want to contaminate it by exposing it to something else. These labs take great pains into making sure they're not contaminated once they get them, so don't contaminate it before
And that
they get
could
them.
be anything, just like your little fomites.
Yeah,
I mean, like
if you
just-
see a fly flying around your swab and landing on it, throw it away and do another one, because that little fly could have brought who knows what to the table. So that's something you need to be aware of. And again, all these stories, all this information is food for thought. Once again, if you have questions, you have stories you want to share, send us email. gobblesreptiles@gmail.com is our email. All one word, Gobbles Reptiles. We have Instagram at Gobbles Reptiles.
Yeah.
Brittany's on Facebook. You can find her, Brittany Gobble or Gobbles Reptiles there also.
Yeah.
What have I missed? Anything?
I don't want to put it in the video because, bots and all that good stuff. But if you're wanting to do the anonymous phone call thing, our number is actually on Morph Market. So if you go to Gobbles Reptiles on Morph Market or www.leglesslodge.com, I just wanted to say that. That takes you to our Morph Market. But the number is there. So if you want to do that and do it more anonymously or whatever, feel free to reach out to us that way.
And if we don't answer immediately, be patient with us because we have busy lives also. We will get to you on it. I try to get within these messages within 24 hours. So
yeah. So hopefully this gave you a little more information.
And I hope I covered everything. We talk and start rambling on about all this stuff, and I lose my train of thought. She loses her train of thought. So if we missed something, comment. We may do another video down the road. Right now, the information is staying about the same, and you've heard what we know. And you can take that information and take other people's information, and that's what I would recommend anyway. Merge it together.
Yeah.
And come up with your own game plan for your own facility, your own snakes, your own buyers.
Thank you, guys.
You want to show them?
Yes! I've been trying not to be distracted because they're so cute. So Johnny bought a bunch of carnivorous plants. I'm going to see if I can show it and let it focus on this. How cute are these things? I just love them. All right, so maybe we'll show you guys if you're interested when he gets all of the whole thing planted with the different species and let you see them. But it's so cute. Bye, guys.
See y'all.